Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Chinnery, and I'm coming to you from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County. And we're doing another one of our Lunch in the Garden programs. We've done a series of these in April, and this is our last one. So we're wrapping up with a very happy topic, vegetable gardening in containers. And our speaker today is Nancy Scott, who's one of our master gardeners and a very enthusiastic gardener and especially a vegetable gardener. So Nancy's going to share her knowledge about growing vegetables in containers. Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to talk about growing vegetables in containers this afternoon, and I'm going to talk about what worked for me, and also I'll show you and talk about some things that didn't work very well. So I've been container gardening for about 11 years now. I gave up my big property with my large vegetable garden, downsized to an HOA controlled little slip of land that has very heavy clay soil. So I needed to grow vegetables. I love to eat vegetables and organically. So next slide, please. So what I did was we put in a patio and a raised bed, as you can see there. And it has great southern exposure, also with a bunch of different containers, which kind of grew as the years went by. I have a different assortment of containers. It's a great, as I said, great southern exposure. It's not a place that you really want to sit out there in the afternoon, however, because it is very hot and sunny. Next slide, please. And so here's another angle of it, and there's some other containers that I have. And you can see that I've got different sizes going on there. So next slide, please. Here's another container that I have. This one is only about 10 inches. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk today about containers. You saw a few of them. I'm going to talk about the soil that you should use for those containers. I'm going to talk about the different plants that you might want to put in there. I'm going to talk about the location of where you should put the containers with the good soil and the plants. And then I'm going to talk about watering and fertilizing. Now, there are a lot of different types of containers out there, so I'm going to talk a little bit about them. So next slide, please. Containers. So there we go. So there's some of my containers that are waiting in my garage to go out. You can see there's different sizes, and my husband devised this way of stacking them so that we have room in the garage over the winter. And I have the next slide, please. And what you want to know is the bigger, the better. The bigger container that you have, the better it is. The deeper the pot, the better. And there's more soil in there to retain moisture. There's more and resist temperature fluctuations, and also more room for the roots to grow and to absorb the different nutrients. So there's different types of containers. I'm going to talk about a few of those if you want to do the next slide, please. And we saw a little preview of that. So this is cast concrete. These are really beautiful, especially this type for if you wanted to do something a little more formal in your garden. These are very heavy, so once you put soil in them, they're probably not going to go anywhere. They are, however, probably one of the more expensive ones. They do develop a nice patina over the years, and so they will look very nice in your garden. But again, they are heavy, and they are at the top end of the price range. And then I come up to the next slide, please. And these are ceramics. They come in so many beautiful colors and different textures on them. They really look beautiful, depending on what you want to do as far as your color scheme. You want to make sure, however, that they do say that they are frost-free, meaning so when you, if you leave them out in the wintertime, that they're not going to crack over the time of the winter. And then we move on to the next slide, which will show probably the more common type, which are they're plastic, fiberglass, resin, some type of material like that. I don't know. I can't tell the difference. There might be a label that would tell you the difference. These are probably the more affordable type. And again, they come in different colors, different sizes, different textures, and they're usually very lightweight. What I would, however, what I would shy away from is plastic type containers that are very brittle. They usually tend to break much more easily. I've had one that cracked towards the end of the season. So look for ones that are more flexible, resin or plastic. Then I move on to my next slide, which is your unglazed terracotta. I would not recommend this for vegetable gardening because they are very porous. They dry out very easily. They really look nice as a cottage type decor, for cottage type decor. However, they really they're dry out too quickly for what you want to do here. The next slide will show you these half barrels. These have become very, very popular, and they're from whiskey perhaps or something, and they are very big. Probably something else that once you've placed it there and you've put your soil in it, you're probably not going to move it around very much. It depends on the cost. You might be able to get them at a fairly reasonable rate because they will last. They will last you a good long time. Just make sure that they are something has not been treated with any kind of chemicals because you are growing vegetables. And then I come to my last slide of this sort here. And so these are earth boxes, these rectangular boxes here. And I use these when I'm down in North Carolina to grow vegetables over the winter. This winter, not so easy. We didn't have the same temperatures that you had here, but we did have some really, really cold temps. And if you look kind of towards the middle there, you'll see a metal container. That was a copper container that I found at a garage sale or something, and I put dirt in it, and I have been growing things in there. That's another type of container, which is metal containers. I don't have the picture of those nice big ones that look kind of oval shaped or whatever. A lot of those you would not use on a patio or a deck because they're open on the bottom. Smaller ones will be more like that copper one that you will see in the middle. And we will move on to the next slide. Because, very important, your container needs to have drainage. You need to have a way for the water to drain out. And so you're going to look for holes in the bottom. The cast concrete and the ceramic ones hopefully will already have holes in them if you're going to use them, because that's a little tricky to drill a hole. You would need a special bit and a drill and the knowledge to be able to drill holes in that without cracking the pot. So hopefully if you're choosing those, that's the important thing that you want to look at, that there's drainage holes there. And a medium-sized pot is a 12-inch diameter, so a foot diameter is it's really small for most types of vegetable gardening from what I found. So the larger pots, you want at least 5 half-inch holes drilled in there. And you want to make sure that the plastic or the resin pots that you've purchased also have some holes in them. A lot of times there's little indents where you could poke something in, like an awl or something. Please just don't use your husband's best screwdrivers to try this, because they might not like that. So you need a way to make those holes so that you have drainage all around the bottom of the pot. And that drainage is very useful because certainly if the pot, you overwater it or it rains heavily, the water needs to come out. And the next slide will show you a way to deal with the soil that might leak out or whatever if you put this on your wall, on your deck, on your patio, or whatever. And you see on the left side, you'll see the kinds that I had been using, because they're relatively easy to buy, and they're cheap, but they are a more rigid plastic, and they will break much more easily, especially if you're putting a big heavy pot onto it. You crush the side or whatever. The ones on the right I found are more expensive, but they really last much longer and they're much easier to clean. You see on the one on the left, you've got all those little indents which look pretty cool, but if you want to clean those out, and I do clean them at the end of the season, there's a lot of little places you've got to clean out. So the ones on the right are much better, and it's a more flexible plastic also. One thing I will recommend though is any container, don't get a container that has a built-in saucer to it. I found that those retain water way too much, and it's really hard once you've had a rain to get the water out. I mean, you might have to try to get that saucer off of there, and it's really hard to get. Once you get it off, it's really hard to get it back on. So I would not get those. I would save those for in-house in your house or your porch or something where you have more control over the water that you're putting in there. You're not going to have a heavy rain on it. And then we'll move to the next slide, please. So here's a picture of some of my bigger pots, and these are set right on the mulch. This is a good way to do this if you have like a tomato plant or a squash plant or something that's going to send down a lot of big roots, because some of those roots will grow through the bottom of that half-inch hole that you have and get down into that ground, which really helps it on its search for nutrients. And if you show the next slide, which is very similar to this one, you will see instead of lugging all those big heavy pots back into the garage in the winter, my husband came up with this idea of how we just leave the pots there. So if you just left it there, it's very windy where I am, and it would blow a lot of that soil out. So what he did was he took, as you can see, a little bucket, or you can use a pot that you have left over from a hanging planter or something, put it upside down, and then you could see that you have the tarp that he cut. He cut pieces of tarp and put it over there, and then secured that with the bungee cords. And again, it's very windy there, and we had no problems with them blowing off. And that bucket keeps the rain and the snow and everything else from just sliding down and not creating a well and making a big mess. And you might say, well, if you have that bed there, why bother with the containers? Just plant your tomatoes or whatever right down there in the soil. Well, that would be good if that was good soil, but it's not. So we have out from where they put that wall, it's at least a foot of gravel, big chunks of gravel, because that's what they filled the base in to make the patio. And then outside of that gravel is very heavy, thick clay. So not very many things grow well there. I had tried different types of actually shrubs and different things there. There's actually some bee balm there that struggles along. So it's not a good spot to grow anything, but when I have those planters, it really works very well. And again, this is a way to not have to drag those pots back and forth. So I've seen lots of different gardens in different places in different containers. My father-in-law had all these goop buckets that he had scrounged around on his terrace in the Bronx, and he grew tomato plants out of there. I've seen people plant in wheelbarrows, and then I've seen the last slide, the next slide, please, people planting in a boat. So this was down on Long Beach Island. You can imagine on the seashore, the soil is really terrible. One year, this person did have vegetables in there. That was a long time ago, when before I had a cell phone, so I wasn't able to take a picture of it. But so you could see people could use all kinds of different things. I've even seen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, toilet bowls that have plants coming out of them. I don't think I'd want to plant vegetables in it somehow, but everybody has their different tastes. Okay, next slide, please, because I'm going to talk about soil. And this soil is really the most important thing here, because this is where your plant is going to be growing from. It's going to be getting its nutrients, it's going to be getting its water, and it's a very important thing. However, I would not use straight garden soil as shown in this next slide. Here's a big pile of it. Okay, garden soil is a wonderful, amazing thing. What's going on in that soil under the ground? There's all kinds of creatures there. There's worms, there's fungi, there's bacteria, there's bugs, and they're eating each other, and they're pooping, and they're eating their poop, and it's recycling all these nutrients. And there's all kinds of great things going on there. However, there's also pathogens and weed seeds. And that soil, that if you take that soil and put it into the pots, you're going to end up bringing some of those, definitely bringing the weed seeds in, maybe not the pathogens, but you won't have the natural uh, incredible ecosystem going on in that pot that you would in the soil. And it's going to pack down, and it's not going to be anybody in there making it nice and light and fluffy so that the roots can get the air that it needs and the nutrients that it needs. So that's what you want to do, is make sure that you have nice, light, fluffy soil. It's good for better drainage and air circulation. So the next slide, please. So here's two examples. I don't necessarily recommend any of these. It just happened to be what I could see in the stores. And there's really no set definition for potting mix kind of container gardening soil or whatever. There's no standards for it. So you want to be careful what you're buying. The one on the right does have fertilizer in it. It says it feeds after. I like to use organic fertilizer. If I'm growing organically, I might as well, I'm going to go for the whole thing with the organic fertilizing. And if there's lots of different brands to use. Generally speaking, cheaper is not better. And you want to make sure that you get something that's of decent quality. If you're just doing a few pots, then I would suggest just buying, a couple of bags of these potting mixes. But you want to make sure that it's for container gardening or labeled that. Nothing like a topsoil or just plain soil mix. You want something that's, this one on the left says premium. So what that means, I don't know. They could put, I think they can put just about anything on the label. However, if you want to do the next slide, please. If you want to do a whole bunch, like I did initially, you could look up different potting soil mixes. This came also online. If you're familiar with square foot gardening, Mel has a whole formula also for what you would do. So here's just an example. If you had a 12-quart bucket and you were mixing these in, so you would do the coconut coir or peat moss. You want to have perlite in there, vermiculite, compost, sand, and a type of fertilizer that you would put in there. And you want to, you would be mixing all those things up, and then after you mix it up, then you would put it into your pots. Next slide, please. So I'm basically using these type of things. So my potting soil mix is, I'm using Pro Mix. I buy the big bags of Pro Mix because I use that to start my seedlings inside. So I have, and it's a big bale, so I have plenty left over, and I might as well use it. So that's what I use pretty much. There's other great mixes, don't have to be Pro Mix, but that's the one that I happen to use. And so 3/4 of that to a quarter of composted cow manure. I use Moodoo, which is getting harder to find. I know there's other varieties. There's something, Coast of Maine, I guess, is another organic brand. So I want my cow manure to be organic as well. So I would mix that up and I would use that. Now I do reuse the soil in my pots from year to year. I will dig out some of it perhaps and move it around a little bit. The only time, and then I would also, if not, I would add the composted cow manure to it, and perhaps some fertilizer, and I would mix that into the pot. But I do reuse the soil unless uh, there's some issue with the plant. If the plant doesn't grow well, or there's some, uh, basically, if it doesn't grow well, then I know that there's something wrong, perhaps with the soil in there, and I will discard the soil. The one time that I did have that issue was when I used one of those pots with a saucer in it, and there was just too much water in there, and the roots rotted out. So I took that soil and I got rid of the soil and put it in a plastic bag and got rid of it. I wasn't going to reuse it. I didn't know exactly what might be in there, if there was something diseased in there or not. I disinfected the pot. I will, however, reuse the pot. But I would refresh the soil from each year. So my next slide, please, is if you're doing a large amount, I would mix it in a wheelbarrow or a tarp. And you would put fertilizer in it. You read the label on the fertilizer, it would tell you, how much fertilizer to use for how much soil that you have. And I would also moisten the soil in the wheelbarrow or the tarp. You would probably spray some water on with the hose or the watering can, however you would do it. And you would make sure that it gets absorbed. It's a lot easier to moisten the soil this way. If you put the dry soil in the pot and then you try to water it, it packs down. It might just go over to the edges of the pot and drain down the sides or whatever. It's a lot easier doing it while you have it in the tarp or the wheelbarrow. Now, some people will put things over the drainage holes. Remember that you want a lot of drainage holes in the bottom. Some people put pieces of shards of pottery or something, or little stones or rocks or something in there to help try to keep the soil from leaking out. If you have the saucer underneath, that will help take care of that. I don't do that anymore. I used to put stones in there, but then sometimes if I'm taking the soil out of the pot, I want to use it in something else, whatever, I end up with all those stones in the bottom, and then I got to pick through it. So I don't do that anymore, but you could, if that's something that you wanted to do. As far as the drainage holes go, another thing that might work good for you is if you have jumping worms in your area, you might want to put some screening over those drainage holes. You want to allow the water to come through, but you don't want those critters to come up through there if that's an issue that you're having. What I want to do is also I want to fill those containers to the top. You've got this nice fluffy soil in there, and you want to fill it, make the most out of these containers, because again, the bigger the better. The more soil that you have in there, the better it is. So you fill it as high to the top of the planter as you can. It will settle down, especially once you start watering it or heavy rain. It'll settle down a little bit, but to make the most of the container, fill it all the way to the top. So the next, plants. So I know it was a terrible winter. Everybody is dying to get out there and get your fingers in the dirt, and you go to the plant places. Don't be seduced. my brother every year comes back with way more plants than he needs, because you get out to the nurseries and you see all these beautiful plants and they look so great, and you just say, oh, I'm going to buy this one, I'm going to buy that one. And if you have a large garden like I used to have, well, there was always room to put a plant. But if you're growing in containers, it requires some pre-thought and some research. So you want to choose your varieties carefully. Next slide, please. So here's the back of a vegetable pack here, and you could take a look at what this happens to be Burpee. And I noticed that Burpee has a lot of, you see in the middle on the right-hand side, it says container friendly. Look at that. It tells you that you can plant it in a container. And how big of a container? It says 24 inches. So that's a 2-foot diameter container. For this particular type, you'll see words like bush, you'll see container friendly, you'll see dwarf, you'll see those type of words there, fits in small spaces. And those are the kinds of words that you want to see because that's the kind of plants you're going to want to use. You might want to look at the disease resistance also. That's something you should do for any kind of plant, vegetable plant that you're going to be. But I would make sure that you do that for as a general rule. But for here, you're looking at the size of the plant. Move on to the next slide, please. And you'll see the same thing for collards here. Look at that. It has one plant per 12-inch container. So collards can get pretty big. There's this, I did not find a dwarf dwarf type collard. This is a standard, but you can grow it in a container, but one plant per 12-inch container. And if you move on to the next, you'll see these are plants that are labeled. This happened to be in a big box store, and you could see the bush early type. You see a true bush type plant, perfect for this size space. It's going to tell you the height, 24 to 36 inches. Okay, that's, 36 inches is 3 feet. That's getting high, but not too bad for putting it in a container, I guess. And what I will say is I did take this picture in a big box store, but I would not buy, and I'm sorry, big box stores, but I would not buy my vegetable plants there. I would go someplace local, buy from somebody that's growing them, that knows about them. Honest Weight Food Co-op sells a lot of local products. Becker's sells stuff that they've grown. There's plenty of places. I can't remember all the places in Rensselaer County, but you probably could find nurseries and places that grow their own vegetables. If it's not labeled, and or people cannot tell you about the plant, don't buy them. You need to know what kind of plant you're getting, and it's good to know the people that are growing them from them, what they're doing. They're going to be taking care of it. Of course, you could, if it just has the variety, you could look it up on your phone. But usually people that know about their products, their plants will grow really, will pay much more attention to their plants. And you want good, healthy plants to start out with. Next slide, please. So here's something, again, I got off the internet. It's soil depth for, your popular vegetables. So this pertains basically to all different types of growing conditions, but it's good to know what's going on with it because you might only have a pot that's 18 to 24 inches, and you could see beets, you're growing something root. Vegetables, you need something with a lot of room in it. Shallow is considered, so I don't know about growing broccoli in 18 inches, but I know that lettuce and arugula and different kinds of greens can grow very well in something very short, like 12 inches. And this will give you some idea that so you would need at least 2 feet deep for tomatoes. There is one variety, or there's probably more than one variety of, I believe it's a patio tomato that will grow. You can buy them right now in pots. They're already potted up and they've got a little trellis kind of a thing on them. They say perfect for patios or whatever. That variety will stay small. But mostly you would need a good 2 feet to grow a decent type of tomato plant. If we move on to the next slide, please. So this is a planter that I have, and you can see all this lettuce I have here. Here was something I shouldn't have done, plant the whole thing with lettuce all at the same time, because then what do you do with all that lettuce at the same time? I've since learned to stagger it and plant a space of it, every 2 weeks kind of a thing. But this planter is really only 12 inches deep with the soil. The wood decorating on the bottom, decoration on the bottom really makes you think it's deeper. But you can get quite a bit of lettuce and those arugula, cilantro, some herbs out of this because they could take the shallow growing. Next slide, please. Now, here's a cucumber plant on the other hand. That needs a lot more room to grow. It could grow, roots can grow 3 to 4 feet deep if it's allowed to, and it has also big lateral roots. So you're going to need a big space for cucumbers to grow. They're not going to grow very well in 12 inches of soil. So next I have, the next slide is the most popular of the vegetables that people grow are tomatoes. And probably everybody that's ever grown a tomato knows why, is because that's the only time you're going to get a delicious tomato. The ones in the supermarket are just horrible. So a lot of people like to grow tomatoes. So I'm going to talk about tomatoes because they're so popular. And there's two basic type of tomatoes. They are called determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. And I can have the next slide, please. So you could see, again, this packet of Burpee tomato bush steak hybrids, and it does say the word determinate after it says dwarf plants. Now, determinate tomatoes are going to grow and put out their flowers, probably most of the flowers all around the same time. And then the fruit is going to ripen all around the same time. And after you pick that fruit, you're not going to get very much off of that plant again. The plant grows to a certain size and does its thing. Now, it's wonderful if you want those tomatoes to can them or to make sauces or whatever you're going to do. That works out well. And the size works out well for growing them in planters or containers of some sort. So determinate is what you want to look for if you want a smaller tomato plant. However, if you don't, can I see the next slide, please? If you pick an indeterminate type, you could see what you could get here. So that stone planter there is 2 feet deep. Okay, and it's not that wide really, but that is a sun gold tomato plant, and it is an indeterminate plant. And so when I was trying to get the tomatoes off the top, I had to climb up on the wall and be picking those tomatoes. Not a very pretty picture. It's very windy by my site, and you could see we put all kinds of ways of trying to keep that up there. And never do that again. Way too big, those tomato plants. We got a lot of fruit off of it, and you could see in the background there's another tomato plant. I can't remember what that one was. I believe it was a type of plum tomato, which also was an indeterminate type. So indeterminate tomato plants, I've seen them higher than 12 feet, and it's till frost will kill them. They'll just keep going and going and going. So you want to make sure you pick determinate types and read the labels carefully. And if you want to keep those tomato plants contained and don't have anything crazy like this. Okay, the next slide, please. So we move on to spacing. And the next slide, please. So, oh, look at that. It's beautiful. So you've all seen the container gardening for different types of annuals and perennials. And look at that. You have the thriller, filler, spiller idea. These look gorgeous. A lot of them will grow very well for you, and they'll look beautiful. You know, keep them deadheaded or whatever. But vegetables, they don't like that. You don't want to crowd them. Okay, they need all the space they can if you want them to produce something that you can eat. You could I've seen some planters like this that people would put maybe a couple of herbs in there or a lettuce plant or something. But then once you harvest the lettuce, what happens? There's a hole, maybe things will fill in or whatever. But for vegetables, you want to give them a lot of space. So the next slide, please. So there's that lonely little tomato plant. Look at that. It looks so lonely. And well, here's another thing. Look at that. I probably did not fill that container all the way to the top. Look at how much room how much more soil I could have fit into that container. Um, that lonely tomato plant isn't going to look very lonely, very long. The next slide, please, will show you that same tomato plant. And look at that. That's gotten pretty big, and it gets pretty big quickly. I've tried interplanting with annuals. Can you see the next slide, please? And so here I had some red kale, and which kind of looks purpley to me. And I thought, well, I got to plant that with some alyssum, purple alyssum. And the purple alyssum is going to grow over the sides, and it's just going to be beautiful. It's going to drape, and then I'm going to have the kale, and it's going to grow up, and it's going to be beautiful. So see the next slide. It didn't turn out quite as what I wanted. The alyssum just didn't do very well, and the actually the kale, it was too big of a variety of kale, and it just didn't do well. And when I did get around to harvesting it, it really was too tough. There are other types of kale that you could try to use that are a smaller variety, and that would probably have worked better. And then I have the next slide, please. What was I thinking about this? These are zucchini plants, and there's two of them in there. And look at that pot. I mean, there's no place for any roots, right? And there's not enough soil in there. Again, I'm wasting space by not filling it with soil. So I don't know why. And I took a picture of it. So the next slide will show you what a zucchini plant could look like. So again, that's in that 2-foot planter. No way that those two plants ever got to be that size or produce any zucchini. So you got to keep that in mind for your size of container that you have. Next slide, please. So here's two, I know these aren't vegetables, but here's two similar sized containers with the same soil. They have the same amount of sunlight, etc., and water. And they both were, well, you see the one on the right, it has alyssum and it has lantana in there. And the alyssum just went crazy and crowded out the lantana. And if you look on the other side, on the left side, we have just lantana, just one plant of lantana, and look at how it grew. Same, took those at the same day. So some things, perhaps over time, you could learn what things will go together. Perhaps the flowers will tolerate each other better, but vegetables will not. Next slide, please. So here, when I grow things like arugula like this, or lettuces, different types of greens like this, in the whole big pot that I have, I will perhaps plant half of it and broadcast the seed around. And as the plants come up, I will clip them and use them for different things, kind of like microgreens or whatever, and allow the smaller plants to fill in. And eventually I end up with maybe 3 or 4 plants in that same space that are regular sized. But I've had the pleasure of eating the little microgreens, and you can see it in the next slide. I could put them on tomatoes or throw them in my salad, kinds of things like that. So I don't just buy lettuce plants because that's a more expensive way to do it. Actually, I mean, I did buy some to get me kickstarted in for now, but I don't do that for the rest of the greens because they just come up so quickly and easily, and a packet of seeds is way cheaper than continuing to buy plants. So now we'll move on to my herb garden here, and the same thing, herbs, 1 plant per pot. I've tried planting other things together, and one of them will take over and the other will not do well. So one plant in the pot, and you could see there's so many different herbs that you can grow, and this is especially good for, even if you have a vegetable garden, this is a way to grow mint so it doesn't take over your garden. And then we have the next slide, please. Location. Where are you going to put all these planters and pots and things? Can you move on to the next slide? So you want to have as much sun as possible. I know you say, well, sure, you know, plants need to grow, but if you are interested in fruiting plants like your squash and your tomatoes and your peppers, cucumbers, all those things, you need at least 6 to 8 hours. And I'm saying probably more to have really good, healthy plant and have really good um, uh, produce. Next slide, please. So these lettuces, I'm going back to this planter again, these lettuces actually don't get much sunlight until the afternoon, and they just do fine. So lettuces, things that don't require, that aren't fruiting, that aren't going to produce a fruit, uh, they could take less sunlight. So if you have an area that's a little more shaded, and actually this kind of works good for my cilantro because it doesn't get as much sunlight, and it keeps it from going to seed a little bit better than it would if it was in some place where it was getting a lot more sunlight. This type of planter is not good for chard. However, chard is one of my favorite greens, but that it does have a big root on it, and it will not grow well in here. I've tried it. Now, another thing that you could look to is, next slide, please, is planting. So this is my garden here. This is the most space that I have. I do not plant the same things year after year in that space. Because I, again, don't want diseases and pests there. So I'm limited, but I moved the tomato. And actually that tomato plant that you see in the foreground, that is that sun gold tomato plant that went crazy that you saw in the last slide. And I have garlic in there that I had planted over the winter. So I do try to do some kind of rotation of the plant. So I'm not planting specifically tomatoes and peppers, those type of things in the same soil. I do rotate, however, rotate the pots themselves. And you see the next slide. Here on the right, you see there's a square planter, and that has green beans in it. That's a little hard for me to rotate or turn around, but the small bean pot there next to it, that I believe has escarole in it, and I do turn that like a quarter turn every week if I can remember. I just turn it so that all the plants get the same amount of sunlight. They're not all reaching towards the sun, and it makes it look fuller. It also is a good idea to do that for air circulation. So if you have the pots along with a wall behind it or some other things behind it, you want the air to be able to circulate well. So turning the planter and not having it right up against the wall is a good thing. The next slide, please. So I definitely turned these peppers around, sitting up on the wall, and tried to keep them from getting overrun by the hydrangeas in the back, which got a little too close. So I did pull that planter out and was turning it so that the whole plant would be nice and full and bushy. Now, if you notice that your plants are getting very stretchy and tall, then you're not having enough light. They're not getting enough light. And the opposite, if there's maybe too much light, you might see some scorching of the leaves. You could even see that from if there's reflection of the sun on windows. Sometimes I've seen that, trying to figure out why there was, pardon me, leaves that were scorched, and it turned out that that was what was happening on a very hot afternoon. Okay, next slide, please. So water and fertilizing. Next slide, please. Watering is very different for each garden and each time of the different times of the year, right? Depending on how hot it is. And you want to check the pot. Now I'm ahead of myself with this slide, but you want to check each pot each time, and the best way to do that is stick your finger down in there. I mean, you might have an inch or two of dry soil, that's fine on the top, but you want to put your finger down there and make sure that if it's moist down there, you might not have to water that plant. And you might need to also look to see if you have those saucers, it's an indication of how much water is this in those saucers. You don't have to water that plant, certainly. And you want to water deeply, and you want to make sure you water the soil. You want to water around the base of the plant, not the leaves. You want to make sure that you're watering down in the soil. Now, I had a lot of different planters, and it would take me a long time. So that's hence the slide that you see here with the hose faucet timer, and you see the Y connector there. So the Y connector, you screw that into where your hose bib comes out, and one side would be for your hose, and the other side would be where you would hook up your irrigation system. And that's what I have in most of those pots back there. I have my irrigation system going. And you could, again, this was something that I saw in one of the big box stores. You can get all kinds of information online. You can go all kinds of different kits that will come with different lengths of hose, with different types of hose, with different tips on those hoses that will allow you to water different size pots. There's ratings on them, a gallon of water every 10 minutes kind of thing. So it's something else that you can learn about. Again, there's YouTube videos all over that will give you instructions on this. So this is how I water most of the vegetables that I have. Next slide, please. So if you can look, see if this right down the middle, again, see, I did a better job with growing those lettuces. There's some bigger ones and there's some smaller ones, and you probably can't see, but there's some very tiny little seedlings also mixed in there. But this is watered with the irrigation system. Next slide, please. And you can see where the irrigation system is on the right, goes up the trellis, and to the left, the water spigot is on, attached to my house on the right-hand side. So it travels up there so that it can get into the other beds. Next slide, please. And it goes across that big bed right there. And next slide, please. And here it is going into some peas. And if you could see it, you could see that there is a smaller tube that runs off the bigger tube. And again, that would have a fitting on the end of that more flexible, smaller tube so that you could adjust the amount of water that would go in a plant, because I could put a different, after the peas are done, I might put something else there, or a bigger pot or something, and I would need to adjust that. Next slide, please. So when are you going to water? Early morning is the best time. Very best time. If it's over 90 degrees, and you checked most of your plant, you checked the plant, I would do perhaps a late afternoon watering, but never ever in the evening. If you're doing the evening watering, you're going to just encourage all kinds of different fungi and diseases and slugs and pill bugs and all kinds of other things in there that you really don't want. So never in the evening. And again, when you're watering, you want to make sure you're watering at the base of the plant. Don't hold the watering can up and water all those leaves. You don't want them wet. They'll get wet enough when we have the rain. They don't need to be wet. The next slide, please. And you're going to fertilize. Because you used a different type of soil, soil-less mix is not going to, unless you add fertilizer to it, you're not going to have enough nutrients in there. So I always choose an organic only, a slow release. I do once a week, I fertilize all those plants. You could also use a water-based some kind of water-based fertilizer where you're mixing it in the watering can and putting it in. Again, there's directions on that. I use mostly Espoma products, and I sprinkle some of that on the base of, into the soil, and then I water. That's my lazy way of doing it. Tomatoes, I find, need some extra calcium and magnesium. It helps with blossom end rot because of different fluctuations in the soil, how much uh, moisture is in there and not, because it's in a pot. Sometimes it makes it more difficult for that balance. So I do add that. There's a number of different ones that you can get where, again, it's a liquid and you add it into your watering can and water with that. And then you need to remember that there are rain issues, because if you get a lot of rain, that rain is going to percolate through and your soil, and it's going to pull out the nutrients that you put in there with the fertilizer. So you want to make sure, if you've had heavy rain for a couple of days, you might need to refertilize again. And next slide, please. So benefits of container gardening. Okay, my first benefit, the next slide, is weeding. Look at that healthy dandelion weed. You're not going to find those in your container plants, or at least I hope not. It doesn't take long to weed. My other garden, it was big garden and I got a lot out of it, but boy, I spent so much time weeding. I had to weed the paths and the places in between. All, you don't have any of that. Okay, you got your planter, and it's going to be mostly covered by the plant that you put in there, the tomato plant or the lettuce plants or whatever. So you're not going to have opportunity for that many weeds, and there's no weed seeds in this mix that you've got. The height allows you to see without bending. Here's the next slide. So look, I can pick those green beans on the right very easily, and the cucumbers, you know how cucumbers hide. Look at that. I can go around, I could look, I don't have to get down on my hands and knees looking for those cucumbers hiding under the leaves. I could see this also, the next slide. Look at that, squash bugs, real easy to see. I don't have to bend down and crawl around looking for them. They're much higher up because they're in a pot or a container of some sort. And look at that. There's those ghostly little ones that are just coming out of their eggs. Also, bunnies, it's a little bit harder for them to get up into the planters, depending on the size of them. They will try to climb up there, but it's a little bit harder for them. Deer, the reason that I had those earth boxes on my deck down in North Carolina is because we have a terrible, terrible deer problem. So if I planted those things in the ground, nothing would have been left. They would have been gone in one night. So you can use different areas of your home to plant things, and they're close to the house, as you saw. For me, anyway, the herbs are right there next to my sunroom, so I can, and closer to my kitchen, so I could just pop out there and get what I need. Don't have to walk a long distance, and I don't have to spend years amending my soil. As I said, I had heavy clay soil, and I have nice soil that I can grow things in now. I didn't have to be trying to dig that soil out, which is just really very difficult. And places don't want it. Where do you take it? They don't want your soil. So problem areas, you can grow a lot of things in problem areas that you might not be able to do in the regular ground. And there's no heavy cultivation. I'm not flipping a whole big bed or whole big beds, because the soil is very nice and light and fluffy. And I just need to amend it, make sure that I amend it, but I don't have to be flipping anything or doing anything else. And now we're to the last slide. And there's the beautiful vegetables there. And the next slide, please. Recap. Okay, we got 4 more minutes. Okay, the bigger the better. Use the biggest containers you can find. Make sure that you have good drainage. Make sure you poke those holes in there. Light and fluffy soil. Fertilize them. Know your plant variety. Make sure you don't have one of those huge indeterminate tomato plants in a 2-foot pot. It's not going to work. Give them plenty of room. Lots of sun, water. If it needs it, make sure you check to see if it needs it. And morning, and you'll learn which pots dry out faster, where they're located, which plants. I mean, that's something that you'll learn as you go along. Make sure you don't wet the leaves. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned something. Certainly, I hope you learned something from my mistakes. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nancy. You have a very photogenic setup, so thank you for sharing all those great tips and all those great pieces of advice.